Oh, hello again, everyone. Welcome back, and thanks for visiting once again after a short gap of a couple of weeks or so since my first video on the Lightning. The construction progress continues on that, and I'll have another video for you, I suspect, before too long. But today I'm going to have a look at a model company that's a little new to me, with a model that's new to probably many of us, but will be well enough known by people, particularly if you go to Duxford at any stage. And this is the DH.89 Dragon Rapide. I acquired this model from a well-known internet, and I was surprised by at exactly how small the box is. It's really quite small indeed, about a foot long by about 8 inches wide, and it's a 1/48 scale kit. So there were a couple of choices for this particular one, and there's one that's liveried in the colours of, I think, the Red Devils, so it has a sort of RAF type livery to it. And that has no real internal detail at the back here. It's just essentially a square box. But this is the Royal Flight version of it, which in the 30s and early 40s was used by the monarchs of the United Kingdom, or England, shall we call it, to ferry them about the place. So it was originally designed as a 6-seater short-haul airliner. And was it 6? Yes, I think it was six to 8 seats anyway. But the Royal Flight version, I believe, only has 4 seats, and we should see a little bit of this. Now, just to say that the Royal Flight version that I've got here, that we'll take a look at today, costs a little more than the Red Devils version, I suspect, because there's a significant amount of internal detail inside it. I think that I was attracted to this because that internal detail seems to have been quite nicely done. Anyway, so as I've said before, we have a Mistron encrusted box here, so we'll take the lid off and just put that away. And as you can see, as you slide the lid off here, let's just zero out a little bit, there we go, you're confronted with a flip top further box inside, which we can then open up. So we've got glossy pages of instructions here, and they're very carefully folded, or the components are fairly carefully folded into the instructions. There's what have we got here? We've got some transparencies there, some glass parts for the cockpits, and a pretty well packed selection of components, I would say. That looks quite good to me. And also some things in little bags here, which we'll look at in a minute. So we'll just put those away to one side carefully there, and withdraw the rest of our bits and pieces here, and then we can restrict ourselves to looking at the instructions. So there's a reason why this kit is a little bit more costly than the ordinary kit. It has largely to do with the fact that you have some photo etch here. There are also masks, which is great. I didn't realise that. There's some blue cockpit masks here. Let's see if we can take this stuff out and have a quick look at it before we go any further. Got to be quite careful with this. I don't want to crease the bits and pieces. So there's those masks. As you can see, there's a lot of windows, so there's quite a lot of masking to do. Now, I could have done that freehand, but it would have taken, well, a very long time and much feeding of the swear box. And you've got some photo etch components here as well. It'll become apparent at some stage what they are, but the first thing I can see here is that they've secured the photo etch to the cardboard backing here with some sellotape. Now, I think that's going to be quite difficult to take off, and given that there are flat components here, we're going to have to be really quite careful, to be honest with you. I'll just zero in on the cockpit layout there. There we go. We can see that there. There's a nice amount of detail there, and I think this section here I'll just use this wooden poker here for a minute. Would be the back end of that, so I suspect that one decals onto this and then lays this over the top, possibly with a sheet of clear plastic or something like that, cellophane, which would add to the effect of a really good detailed instrument panel. Quite how much of that will be visible is open to question right now, but we'll soldier on through. But as you can see, quite delicate, these components here. I don't know what all of these things are for, as I've said, but there are some other, forgive the flicker on the camera by the way, that's because this background is white here. I'm not really sure what these things are, but we'll again find out. So let's bring you back out to far away again and put that away somewhere safe. We have couple of sheets of decals here, and they'll be quite useful, I think, for paint finishing, or with the paint finishing. So I may actually use those rather than paint finish. It depends how lazy I'm feeling. So you're probably out there in modelling land saying, now look here, Zinners, don't be lazy, old chap. So let's look into the instructions. And I mean, the first thing that you see here is actually we have a picture, quite a large picture in behind there, which goes across from the front to the back of the book, and it's done on quite nice quality paper. But you can see the well, that's, I think, Windsor Castle there. That's the green at Windsor Castle, I think, and quite what this pilot's doing. It's a good thing he hasn't got passengers in there, because he seems to be doing quite a steep turn there. I can't imagine Queen Alexandra being too impressed with a steep turn like that over Windsor Castle. She might not be at all happy about that. But anyway, let's move onwards. We've got some sprue call outs here, so what we can do is we can fetch out the sprues as we need them, and it's a fairly straightforward build. As you'll probably know, the Dragon Rapide, and I write about this in my Substack by the way, was a further development from the DH.86 Express, which was, to be frank, not a successful airliner. There were only about 52 or 54 built, something along that line, but they were at the edge, shall we say, of plywood and fabric technology, in the sense that they were very light aircraft with slightly underpowered engines, which in anything but the calmest weather weren't really that stable, owing to how the centre of gravity was positioned, and the fact that, of course, in airliners you get weight changes due to people moving around. Not particularly useful, in the sense that if your centre of gravity is very sensitive and you start moving around, then things are going to get difficult for control of the aircraft, particularly if your engines aren't very powerful. So anyway, that's something I write about in the Substack. You might like to read that, and I appreciate you allowing me to shamelessly plug my own writings, but you can tell me what you think about them, and if the answer is rubbish, then so be it. So yes, here we are. First sections. Let's get the old poker out here a minute, and we can use it as a directing stick. Pilot's seat here being assembled, and that's E23. Let's find the E sprue if we can. Yes, these are fairly well marked. D. That's E, and you can see them there. I will look into here for a minute, because I think there might be some components in here that we could replace, but let's there's a staple there. Need to try and remove. I'll be lazy and just pull, and that will do it. We'll do the same at the other end, and we'll take a look, see what all this lot looks like. See if there's any cockpit seats in here. They don't appear to be, if I'm absolutely honest with you. These are the seats for the 4 people that live in the back of the airliner. And we'll just open this up here. I must say how nicely packaged this is and how carefully it's been packaged in order to preserve this detail. So what have we got here? We've got what looks like a radio there. These are curtains. These are all 3D printed. We've even got some luggage there. So royal luggage, because this was a royal flight, whatnot, as you'll know. My first feeling of this is it's really quite smooth, much smoother than the M52 bodywork, but there's some quite delicate stuff there. You can see just there like that. That's quite delicate. So one's going to have to be really very careful taking this stuff out. Yeah, I think much care required there. Anyway, to return to the cockpit, we'll be using the original kit plastic for all of this here, and there's a dashboard. They're calling it dashboard, but instrument panel. There are 2 versions. You can use E21 on the E sprues. You can use E21 and E25, which is, that's 25 there, and you can see if we just buzz into that again, you've got some detail of after a fashion, but it won't be as detailed as the as the updated photo etch product. Yeah, okay, that's fine. That gives us some choices, does it not? And that's quite nice. Then we're looking at adding in componentry to the front section where the pilot sits. So this is a single pilot in these aircraft. Later airliners and larger airliners would have had a pilot and co-pilot, but this one did not. It was a short haul airliner, so that any problems with pilot fatigue would not be such an issue. So we can see that those components are going in there. That will be the throttle. Just see if we can just bring that in a little bit so that you can see this. And just fold that over. You can see throttle, elevator trim. Not sure what that is. Nigel from Nigel's modelling bench, he called it a greebly, and so we'll call it a greebly, shall we? And then, so that's the starboard side, port side here. A1 and A2, you can see those numbered there. Port side, we'll add some more detail in, some pipe work and so on, and then we're into the main deck, and we're using component G2, which is that one there, in order to add in the 4 seats. Now the 4 seats here will be, in fact they have the royal crest on the back of them, you can see that. I wonder if that's visible on the seats. It might be, you never know. Oh, it is. Oh my word, look at that. Let's just see if we can show you that. These are 3D printed, by the way, as of course you will know. And you can, there you go, you can see those royal crests there. So there's some significant amount of detail painting to be done here as we will detail up those. As you can see, the seats will be a lot more comfortable and a lot more salubrious, shall we say, than a standard peasant's DH.89, there we are. So we're putting those in, and those little shutters there. The one thing that would be different in the Royal Flight DH.89 to a standard is that the pilot's section, the cockpit here, would have been open on a standard DH.89, but it would be closed with little doors here, privacy doors and so on, between the pilot and the royal family. Edward VIII, for example, flew in one of these. and obviously you can see detail at the back here, a bar, so yes, you can have your in-flight champers and so on, and then the luggage back there, so you can go into some detail, much of which will be visible through the side window panels, so that should be quite nice. But there's an awful lot of, I think, distinct detail painting to be done here, and quite a lot of artistry required in order to prevent these seats from just looking like something that's really rather two-dimensional. So I shall have to be at my best in terms of detail painting. Just to slip back to section 6 here, you can see the positioning of the seats here, 39mm from the back section here, and then the rear seat chairs are 56.5mm from the back section at the front here. So we can see that we've got a lot of detail in how to make certain that we get the positioning of those seats correctly, yeah, that looks all pretty good to me. So we're using a combination here of the plastic component, which is that, and then some other bulkhead components here as well, which you can see there, the doorways and the bar and the buffet sort of section area, as it were, so that His Majesty could have a sandwich, or I don't know, a bag of chips or something. You never know. He could have done. You never know. There we are. So let's move on. Yes, here we go. So we go into a little bit more detail about that here with the addition of various other components, and now we're into it looks like section 8, placing the instrument panel here, and also the I say it looks like a radio set, but it looks like perhaps it might be a almost a radiogram that you know, is some sort of shall we say early in-flight entertainment system. I'm sure you experts out there will be able to say that it's not that, but I suspect that it might be the pilot's radio system, so that he can communicate with people around him, which makes sense. And then we're going into section 9A, and we're having to look at cutting out components here potentially, if necessary, according to the type that you're doing. So you're going to have to make some choices here. We've got 9A and 9B, where we're bringing together the well, actually, by the look of it, the lower wing section, the fuselage sections, and the inside of the fuselage together, all in one. That's quite interesting. I'm going to have to investigate quite what we need to cut out, if anything, but these cutouts are made somewhat easier for you. If we look at the port section here, we can see there are lines cut out there that would allow us to do this, so we can take a look at that and investigate that later. It could be for the cabin door, perhaps. I don't know, not really clear on that. Anyway, so we're putting the wings, the lower wing, on there, and F5, let's have a quick look. Would that be, that might be a door section there. Let's have a look at the F sprue here, if we can find it. That's the E, G, C, B, okay, D, A, F must be the photo etch components, then one would have to guess. So there is some door in here somewhere that we need to fit in. I'm not clear on what that is, I will say. However, we'll look again later on. I'll keep you in the picture when I do a build video of this, but you can see quite a lot of components being put in. You can actually see now the enclosed cockpit with the doors here that were fitted, I think, for the Royal Flight units. We're fitting curtains in here, we're fitting railings in here as well. Those little narrow photo etch things that I pointed out earlier on, which were very small and narrow, are probably the curtain rails for our curtains here, and we move further on. Again, we're doing that both sides by the look of it. Again, much more detail painting to get the light and shadow on these curtains here. That's going to be a real job, and then we'll have to do that on both sides, I would suspect, in order to make it fit properly. Then we're looking at, not quite sure what this is here. This is on the roof of the aircraft. These are probably grab handles or something like that, and these are probably cargo nets for putting small articles above the passengers. From there we move swiftly onto the engine nacelles and engine assemblies. So you can't see much in the way of an engine on these. I don't think you would want to I mean, you might want to do an engine and display it, but this, I think, is an aircraft that would probably lend itself to a, shall we say, a static display on the ground. And the engines that powered this particular aircraft was a Gypsy Major, or Gypsy 6, I think it was. So it was a 6-cylinder Gypsy engine, which was an inverted engine, so that the pistons fired upwards rather than downwards. So you have to make up 2 of those, and then install them onto the lower wing panels here with the undercarriage wheels and spats here. And then we move to section 19, and we're putting in the interplane struts here. So because this is a tapered wing, you have 2 inboard interplane struts and 1 outboard interplane strut, which then forms the bay. You have a variant of a cabane strut here, moving inwards, which would be a landing strut effectively, as it's acting in compression actually on landing, and then fitting the top wing there. Same on the other side, interplane struts there, and then we're fitting the roof, and now the very delicate and rather nice Art Deco shape of this aircraft, as well as the nose cone, is beginning to really come into its own, and you can see this lovely flowing line of this really very elegant looking aircraft, I would have to say, and it'll start to really look like an aircraft at that stage, I think, and very much it deserves to do as well. Where is the top section there? That looks like it. Yes, there's a glass part here to be glued in here, and then obviously some masking to allow the frameworks to be painted in. You might like to paint inside those as well. That certainly could be done. Then we're into the tail planes and vertical tail members, including the bell cranks and various things, and also the tail wheel too, and because this is what they call a tail dragger aircraft. And at that point we're starting to look at putting in the flying wires and landing wires, and that's going to be a very delicate task, and I think easy line is probably the thing to do. All this black thread stuff that you can get that's quite elastic, that would make the job really quite straightforward. It's going to be repetitive and so on, but that is what one has to do. Right, okay, so I've now discovered from looking at the instructions what the those funny little widgets on the photo etch were all about. So if we want to do a flaps up section, that's pretty straightforward there, and my guess is that there we are, look, so these here are the flaps. So if you want to do flaps up, simply just glue them into place here. If you want to do flaps down, same thing here, but these little Johnsons here are the brackets that you would put them onto, so that's exactly how that works. So that's what those little widgets are. So you could have flaps down and have a very, very delicate structure showing there. That would be really quite nice. I shall think about what to do about that one. And in stage 27, of course, we're now looking at the flying and landing wires and the interbay wires. Remember that these interplane struts create a gap called a bay. That is arguably a bay there, and this is a bay here, so we could call this a two-bay biplane or a twin-bay biplane. But as you can also see, important to recognise that there are two, these would be flying wires going from top to bottom, and these would be I think, yeah, these are landing wires going from bottom to top. I think that's right. It could be the other way around, but there's these are the lovely little details that will really finish this model off and make it look absolutely super. And then you can see a picture of pretty much the completed kit there before you go into painting. Now, painting this, I'm afraid, is going to be a challenge with all those wires. You have a couple of options: GADDD and GACTT, but actually very nicely you have Humbrol, Hataka, Ammo Acrylic, AK, Mr. Colour and Tamiya colours that you can obtain in this very helpful colour call out here. That's absolutely super, that. Or if you wanted to, you could do it in the way that I will probably do it, which is to mimic the de Havilland Dragon Rapide that's at Duxford, TX135 maybe. I'm probably wrong with that, more or less certainly in fact, but that would be the finished look of the Royal Flight thing. I'll decide what to do on that one. I may or may not use these colours. It would be a very striking model, I have to say, with those colours. I think that would be really quite striking. Finally, stenciling, of which there is a veritable plenitude, shall we say. Yes, the cutouts here, I suspect, of having the doors open by the look of things. So you might want to have the cabin and crew doors open rather than shut, and I think that would be the option for cutting things out. But there we are. That's a quick review of an Amoury Models Group model, an Amoury Models Dragon Rapide. It's the first time I've ever looked inside one of these particular kits. I must say, and I hope that you share my enthusiasm to some extent, this is really quite impressive. It's got some excellent little upgrades, enhancements that you can have both from 3D printed components, just like this, right the way through to your masks, and of course your enhancements with photo etch, and there aren't too many of them. I suppose if I was going to make a criticism, I'd have said don't actually tape this to the cardboard, because that just makes it difficult to take off. And the plastic mouldings look quite nice. They're not too bad. Remember, this is not a metal skinned aircraft. This is a plywood and fabric construction, which would have looked a lot less, shall we say, smooth than a metal skinned aircraft. And in terms of the moulding, it seems okay. The plastic feels a bit different, but I don't think that's going to be too much of an issue, to be honest with you. But we'll see how this goes together. There we are, two little tiny two-bladed propellers there. I shall have to investigate whether they were manufactured by Watts, but they're almost certainly wooden propellers, they would have been. So there we are. So my little look at this says, yeah, this is probably quite a nice little kit for those people who like to detail their interiors and make a nice little job. There's 4 little champagne bottles down there. There we go. They would have been very drunk on their flight if they drank all 4 of them, unless they give some to the pilot, of course, which of course they wouldn't do. No, we wouldn't dare suggest such a thing. But there we are. So thanks for looking in on this. If you got this far, I much appreciate it. Do think about subscribing to the channel. It doesn't cost anything, and it does help the channel to grow. And I'd be much obliged to you, and I shall be back with the next one, which will probably be more on the Lightning F1 that venerable Airfix model from around the late 90s, which I'm adding quite a lot in the way of upgrades to. You can see something here which is the resin upgrade to the shock cone and so on and so forth here, which enhances the inside of the front wheel well somewhat, and that has to be finished off before it can be installed into the fuselage. But there we are. So anyway, thank you very much indeed for your time today, and you're more than welcome. Carry on modelling. I hope you all enjoy your projects. Take care for now. Bye bye.